Well, we continue with the broadcast and news and views this morning right here on Asala Media. If you have just joined us, we welcome you. Now, it is clearly a matter of concern for many of us in South Africa, particularly when we have a government of national unity. But just how united are they in ideology? How united are they in purpose? And does this represent the view of the electorate in this country, the majority of the people? And I am referring to political parties who do not take into account what the majority of South Africans are actually saying. And one of them being the Patriotic Alliance, who are members of the Government of National Unity. They have a minister who is the Minister of Sports in Gayton McKenzie. And we've learned about the South African Friends for Israel hosting a delegation of PA party members on an upcoming tour to Israel. Now, when one looks at the PA and about their justification for the tour, they talk about a number of things and talking about learning from Israel for the good of a future South Africa. Now, remember, this is a country of supremacists, right wing, ultra nationalists committing genocide in Gaza. What can we actually learn from Israel for the good of or a future of South Africa? And talking about Israel, its experience in social and economic development, we need just to see what's taking place in Gaza, in the West Bank, and also in Jerusalem in terms of improving the quality of life of people. And furthermore, it talks about the trip is further supported by the fact that the ANC's foreign policy decisions do not represent the will or the interests of South African people. How many people are they talking about? Perhaps a handful. And unpacking all of this with us this morning, journalist and researcher at the Media Review Network, Mariam Jooma Çarıkçı. Mariam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Juma Mubarak. As always, welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah, Uncle Inayat. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yes, Mariam, I mentioned for the reasons and the motivation by the Patriotic Alliance to justify this invitation by the South African Friends of Israel for them to visit Palestine. What do you make of the reasons that have been given and their justification?
Well, Uncle Inayat, I think it's very important to contextualize who the Patriotic Alliance are, firstly. They are an extremely small party with just 9 seats in parliament. And of course, their leader, as you mentioned, Gayton McKenzie, comes from a very controversial past, having been a convicted criminal himself. So what is their stance and why are they supposedly speaking for people who are apparently not in line with South Africa's foreign policy position? Well, I think it's very easy to say that, this is very blatant politicking and an attempt to capitalize on the current rift that we have in South African society between, not necessarily between white and black, but the discussion around, whose voice gets to be represented on a global stage. And I think by aligning with the Israeli government, which is what the PA have been doing since the outset of the formation of their party, is essentially trying to feed into the very small but powerful lobby, the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby in South Africa, who also have a significant amount of resources that could be plowed back into their party.
Yes. Also, Mariam, I think, I don't know what the PA is actually smoking, because when one actually sees these comments coming through, and on the one side talking about learning from the experiences in Israel in social, economic development. On the other hand, they talk about how Israel can gain valuable lessons from South Africa in terms of nation building. Now, all of this comes against the most brutal genocide that we've actually seen in history. Yet we have comments like these coming out.
Look, I mean, Gayton McKenzie is certainly on something that, doesn't quite explain the extent of his contradictions. This morning's, the Africa Report's most recent edition this morning, it features an interview with him in France, because he's in France at the moment for the South Africa-France investment conference. And essentially, he said, anyone who tells us to criticize Israel is an enemy. And in the same breath, he speaks about the Afrikaner so-called refugees to the States and saying that, no, we need to understand and sit with them. We are the children of Mandela. We need to understand why they perceive themselves to be under attack. So in one breath, you can essentially dismiss, the intense suffering and physical dislocation, physical dismemberment, murder of children and families. And on the other hand, you can speak about, being a child of Mandela. So essentially, I think it's important for the South African public to be aware that as much as the Patriotic Alliance might be saying the right things for land reform and with regard to pro-poor policies, in inverted commas, the fact that they are so inconsistent with their own constitution that says that human rights and dignity is at the core of the party. South Africans must be awake to this, that we cannot allow politicians to ride really roughshod over our democracy by presenting such pathetic kind of defense for Israel and for any country that is committing human rights violations.
But Mariam, at the same time, we also need to be awake and we need to be aware of an organization like the South African Friends for Israel as a lobby group and the impact and the influence they have over politicians.
No, certainly. Look, I think what we need in the South African parliamentary context is we need to have a committee that overlooks foreign funding in particular and lobby groups that are funded. For example, I mean, who's actually paying for this? Who sponsors this entire thing? If they go, if the PA sends a whole delegation, who's paying for this? Does it come out of their parliamentary allowances? To what extent are we actually, putting the bill for what is a direct contradiction of South Africa's moral foreign policy? So yes, we have to be aware of organizations like this. And I think what is, it's very worrying that even within the South African context, the space for debate is now slowly closing. You see, for example, at UCT, the moves against, the PSC at UCT with the senior academics alleging that, funding, US funding is being withheld because of students' affiliation to Hamas. So we need to be very clear about where we stand as South Africans and understand that our history is not up for sale. So Gayton McKenzie cannot use Mandela as a mascot for himself when the actual principles behind Nelson Mandela's philosophy are not actually implemented.
Mariam, the key issue here is, and this is a question that I've been grappling with for a very, very long time, as to how do we counter these lobby groups and lobby groups of our own as well, to make sure that particularly the government sits up, listens and takes notice.
No, certainly we need to demand accountability. As I've said earlier, there has to be some form of parliamentary oversight and civil society groups. I mean, we have a wonderful, really engaging and quite vociferous BDS research group. So we need to be able to take their findings, what they do, and present it to the public in a way that allows them to make, the connections, join the dots to say, this does affect me. In my view, I think, Uncle Inayat, a lot of the debate around Palestine seems to be a humanitarian one, without people understanding the very real political consequences it will have for us as South Africans. If our collective political space is closed, if our ability to debate and bring to the fore the inconsistencies of Western policies and even of our own. I mean, if we continue to sell coal to Israel, we need to be able to debate that. So yes, I agree with you, and I think institutions like yours, the news media like Salam Media, are playing a wonderful role in actually enlightening the public. But we definitely need more.
Exactly. And I think, what we're short of in this country, Mariam, is a think tank to think strategically. And when issues like these come up, we are able to take this thing up and get meaningful results. That's the one thing. But also at the same time, to create that awareness. And I think more importantly, to call out those who are complicit with the Zionist entity, to call them out for who they are and for what they are.
No, so definitely. I think we are constantly living in echo chambers. So with social media, there's been tremendous access to information, but at the same time, customization and personalization of what you're interested in leads to just the same kind of people with the same thoughts saying the same things over and over again, almost like our WhatsApp groups that we have too many of, I think. Um, so what is needed now is essentially for us to connect to the grassroots, to understand, look, South African children are dying of starvation. Palestinian children are dying of starvation. There are two different reasons, two very different reasons for that. How do we join those two, and how do we stand up to say one child is one child too many? Within the African context, I think exactly as you say, we need a think tank that is capable of thinking ahead, so not reactive. We unfortunately have always been on the back foot, responding to claims of terrorism, responding to extremist labels, and so on. But we need to now be able to position ourselves to provide strategic analysis that offers people, more than just, the headlines, which unfortunately is, I think, what many people consume.
Well, and even more unfortunate is given rise to people like Gayton McKenzie, the PA, the DA on the previous visit. Apparently, I'm led to believe that the ACDP also opposed something in Parliament that Al Jamaa had actually brought up as well regarding Palestine. And it's actually just making them a lot more brazen and a lot more bold if we are reactive all the time. And like you say, it requires a proactive approach. I'm just looking at a message from Abdullah Shabal saying Gayton McKenzie comes off as someone who would have sold out Mandela. So, these are the sentiments that are being expressed.
Look again, the extreme contradiction is that the PA calls itself a party of religion, and one of the clauses in their strategy manifesto is to bring God back into schools, to bring religion back into South African lives. And yet, at the same time, you can condone and be completely comfortable with the annihilation of innocent civilians on a mass scale. So it begins to reek, to stink of opportunism, and I think this is where we need to understand that those who are standing up for Gaza now will be remembered, and history is recording, history is watching. You can't get away from this. We know who have been complicit and who have refused to speak out simply to maintain their positions of power. And those who sacrificed, jobs and degrees and comforts for the Palestinian cause will be remembered, inshallah.
Mariam, just looking at the previous trip of the DA and hiding behind the excuse that these tours are arranged and attended by individuals in their private capacity, and obviously distancing their parties from the implications of their visits as well. And again, you've got the likes of Durko as well. These are publicly elected officials. They are representatives of the public. Is it an acceptable excuse?
Not at all. I mean, as you say, a publicly elected official, there is a direct contravention of principles and of loyalties. essentially your job is to represent the majority of South Africans and to work in their best interest. And so by completely contradicting what is at United Nations level, the ICJ level, claims of genocide, by contradicting that position and saying that you're just an individual, you essentially basically showcasing yourself as a fraud, that you have no worth or no value to add to the political space because you're simply incapable of looking at the collective. And we always want to say, South Africa has a spirit of reconciliation, a spirit of Ubuntu, but it shouldn't be something that's just a catchphrase. It needs to be sincerely implemented, and particularly from those in the highest office.
Well, Mariam, Jazakallah khairan so much for that. And once again, for taking time out with us on this Friday morning. All the best to you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Mariam Jooma Çarıkçı with us this morning, and Abdullah continues with one or two comments again, saying that the U.S. is already wanting to ban any statements to support of Palestine by direction of the Nazi Israeli entity, and a second message saying Palestinian children deserve to live may literally become sufficient to file for asylum, so no one doesn't get thrown into a concentration camp. Shukran for that, Abdullah, for that comment. And with that, a quick break. We come back. It's Juma Inspirations.